Hello CIG Tazzies here, and I kind of want to go over turrets with 3.0 PTU. You guys are on the right track. You've made some great improvements. There's just a little bit more tuning that can increase the effectiveness, the intuitiveness of turrets. Um, One of the things I noticed about 3.0 is that you've kind of introduced a interactive mode for turrets. So you essentially have a underlying VJoy first order control over the turret body, and then within a little area you've got a dead zone that doesn't let the turret turn. But you also, on top of that, have essentially a, a zero order, the guns shoot where you point your cursor. Within that, I guess you could call it rotation dead zone, you have zero order aim. Now, one of the issues with that is it's a little bit too narrow. So really where it starts to begin is about right here. This is the right side of where it starts, here's the left side of where it starts. It's just a little bit too small. It actually, this radius needs to be, instead of being this big, it needs to be, the dead zone needs to be about that big. And that'll give us a little bit more degrees of deflection with zero order aim so that you can aim at targets. So if you're going to go the interactive mode, that would make turrets much more effective by having a larger turret body rotation dead zone so that you have a larger radius of, I guess you could say, zero order aim. And then, but one thing that I do have a question about, and makes me wonder why the turrets are set up like this, but we have natural, like like really nice zero order control over pitch. There's no first order VJoy, no interactive mode with pitch. It's literally you aim your cursor and your guns will try and track that cursor as fast as whatever you guys have set for their slew speeds. And it's awesome. So the question is, if this is so awesome and pitch is so intuitive, why don't you implement it on yaw? Why are we doing this whole interactive mode thing when, you could simply let the user control where they point their cursor and just let the turret track track towards the cursor. So, like you can see that gun cross, it's really faint and it only shows up when, it doesn't catch up to my cursor. But why not have it for yaw? It works beautiful. And I mean, this is, what do you call it, probably 90 degrees that you're allowing us to have right here with literally pure zero order, native mouse control over pitch. Why not add it for 360 degrees on yaw? I do understand that there's probably concern that if, you want to have realistic, articulation speeds of these turret bodies on these ships so they don't look like, depending on what the server tick is, if the turret's able to turn too fast, it might look like it's choppy. And, your other concern is probably you don't want, the pilot to be able to look over here because you're designing the turrets to look pleasing in the front field of view, and you don't want people looking, way over here. You don't want someone whipping their view 180 degrees like an owl and looking at the back of the turret and then have to wait for the front of the turret to come around and track it. And I can kind of understand that. But you could, I mean, even if anything, you could have this whole range be zero order. This whole range could be zero order, just like pitches for 90 degrees. You could have it for maybe, 160 degrees, and it isn't until you get to this very far edge, until you get to this very far edge in which it'll actually maybe enable that scrolling, that VJoy, I guess you could say. So yeah, it's like, again, this is a really nice zero order control over pitch. I would get that baby going for yaw. It'd make it so nice. As far as turret control with a joystick, now we have nice aim on the pitch axis. There's no dead zone. It's completely smooth. Now we have this issue with yaw where we bounce. Essentially what I'm saying is when you have a joystick, I'm not sure what the actual deflection range is on a Thrustmaster Warthog, but I think maybe it's 45 degrees. I can't remember what from the full pitch back to full pitch forward on the physical joystick. But that gets divided up by 90, almost 90, maybe 80, 70 degrees inside the game. But then you take the same, maybe 45 or more degrees of physical deflection on the joystick, and you only allow it within maybe what is that? Maybe 45 on the screen, less than that. But the point is that it's people want to have symmetrical rotation rates with both pitch and yaw when they're using their joysticks, because you're tuning your arm to know that if I deflect a little bit, it's going to have one rate, but then you have the range is so narrow on yaw, like you can tell I can really smoothly kind of control my pitch with the joystick, but because you've got the range so small for yaw, you can tell I very quickly am overshooting. So really, that yaw range, you should really open it up so that we can move a lot farther out. Now, one thing is that you kind of got to implement this from a yaw standpoint. You should really not let the reticle bounce within the interior. So what I'm saying is the aim reticle should be in the center here. This interior of this ship should not move around this reticle. It should be all completely fixed. The only thing that should change is the space. The view outside of the interior should change with the joystick. What's great about having this new interactive mode, or even if you guys decided to make an awesome choice and institute, not only have zero order on pitch, but if you did institute zero order on yaw, rather than have even interactive mode, we already know there's two different types of ESP. There's gimbal ESP and there's fixed ESP. So by creating a little bit more segregation by the two, you could have it where, maybe zero order gimbals for turrets don't get ESP, or they get a really weak ESP. But if you're using, the joystick like I am right now, we get fixed ESP, which means that we get a lot stronger ESP. So that means you have that mechanism in which you can bring the two different forms of input on par with each other. And I think that'd be very, very beneficial. Now, one thing that I was going to say is that's not related to control so much is it's going to be the view. So we sit really, really too low in our cockpits. When we pitch all the way down, there's no reason why this HUD takes up 3/4 of our screen. Like this is not utilized at all. And in my view, our view should really, this is what it should be like, where it takes up, if this should be our lowest view, like looking down, where this should be at the bottom. So what we need to do is we need to raise the pilot up, or the gunner up in their seat. They're just sitting way too low. It's kind of like a bathtub. It's like, I don't need to see everything underneath here. It's just, when I pitch completely down, this right here should be down towards the bottom here. And the benefit of that is that it allows if the pilot can sit up higher and he can actually look down with his guns, and the guns can shoot even farther down and they can look down, then the gunner can actually see the pilot. They can see the cockpit. They can see the front of the ship. Because right here, right now, I don't feel like I'm part of a ship. I feel like I'm in a turret that's just floating in space. Like there's no other part of the ship. And it isn't until I get to the back 120, back 190 degrees that I see the engines of the Cutlass to realize that, oh, I am part of a multi-crew ship. And it kind of creates that situation for motion sickness too. It's like you can't see the direction of travel. Yeah, we're going to have space dust, and that kind of helps you get a sense of your direction of travel, but it's like you just feel so disconnected from your pilot. And if this is a multi-crew ship, like I want to be able to share in the experience with the pilot, and right now I feel like I'm totally disconnected from the pilot because I can't see the pilot. Like in a Cutlass, yeah, occasionally you'd be shooting in the other degrees of the turret deflection to be shooting at other targets, but really in these guns, or these multi-crew ships that only have one gunner, really the pilot and the gunner need to be working on the same targets. They need to be achieving on getting on target, on the same target. So it is vital for the gunner to be able to see the targets that the pilot is shooting at. And right now we sit way too low. Our guns can't track those targets. We can only shoot really up. So we got to get raised up in the cockpits. We got to be able to let the guns gimbal down a little bit farther. One thing that I forgot to touch on was gyro stabilization. So we need to have a toggle for gyro stabilization. So gyro stabilization allows the user to essentially, I could aim right over here, and if the pilot started to pitch and yaw the ship, they wouldn't affect my aim. My turret would be gyro stabilized, and the ship would, essentially the turret would compensate for the ship's rotation. Now, when you are doing essentially the gunner and the pilot working together, and you're in a ship that maybe rotates really quickly, it's going to be difficult to aim in a gyro stabilized ship in a ship that rotates quickly. Like the Cutlass. If the Cutlass is chasing some other ship, it's going to be exhausting. It's going to be really hard to keep up with the target. If you both the gunner and the pilot are going after it. So by being able to have a toggle to turn off gyro stabilization, you are aiming as a offset to the pilot. So if the pilot's goal and intention is to aim and shoot the enemy ship in front of him, by turning off gyro stabilization, I only have to worry about deflecting 5 to 20 degrees off what the pilot's aiming at. I don't have to worry about, the pilot is honestly, their goal is the same goal as mine. They're trying to help me get on target because they're trying to get on target. So, as the target evades and they compensate, we can work together. But if you make the gunner responsible for all 360 degrees of yaw and 190 degrees of pitch, they're not going to be able to track that fast target. So it really do need a toggle to turn off gyro stabilization so that we aim relative to the orientation of the ship. One thing that I thought was extremely promising, and I really am happy to see, are weapon sizes increase on multi-crew gunners seats, like man turrets. In the past we've had really small guns, like on the Retaliator, on the Gladiator. The new Cutlass has got it right. Like dual size 4s can make a pretty convincing argument for someone to be your gunner. The Hammerhead, beautiful ship, quad size 4s, 24 size 4 guns. Like that is truly a multi-crew anti-fighter ship, because 4 size 4s is pretty darn competitive with your own ship. So it'll be really cool to see that ship get in the game. Some ships that need to get reworked are the Gladiator. So the Gladiator's got, I think, 2 size 1 guns, and it looks totally awkward. It's got a beautiful entry animation for the gunner, but the placement of that turret was very ill-placed. You put 2 size 1s on it, it's already annoying because you got them hanging over the pilot canopy. You get constant, muzzle flashes, which are extremely distracting. And if you were to actually buff those guns up to something meaningful, it would look totally awkward. It would look like the Avenger with a size 5 nose gun. It would look terrible. So what I'm proposing is they got to do a rework on the Gladiator. I think a great idea would be to kind of, create a turret. Maybe you can even do a remote turret where the pilot, the Gladiator gunner, still has their little canopy or their little thing, but it's a remote turret. You could even make it a man turret, but I would have essentially a turret in the center of the Gladiator, kind of like how the Hornet is, because the Hornet's kind of got that circle, the Gladiator's got that circle on the top. The torpedoes are all on the bottom anyways, so it really wouldn't be that hard for you guys to maybe even create like a side entry. But by putting the man turret or remote turret in the center of the Gladiator, it allows you to mount dual or quad size 4 guns and actually legitimize having a person as a gunner. like I said, if you wanted to, you could literally make it so the gunner and the gladiator can get in there. They just it can be literally just remove the gun mounts from where they are in the gladiator, and they can swivel around, and it can just be for viewing. But when you want to engage in combat, maybe you press a button, and then suddenly it enables your little screen comes up, and then you enter a remote, remote gunner state. But by getting that turret away from the cockpit and farther in the center of the ship, from a design standpoint, it makes it look a lot more ideal to put dual size 4s or quad size 4s on that ship. Makes multi-crew much more worthwhile on that ship. So, anyways, hope you thought my feedback was constructive. I think you guys are really close. I just think that there's a lot of games that do a really good job with turrets, and I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel on it. I know interactive mode really is a unique mechanism that hasn't been involved in any other games in the future, and it's worked really good. It's really intuitive for these fighters because it allows you to essentially set a unique rotation rate for the for pitching and yawing and single seat fighters, and it allows essentially the turret body to articulate it at a speed that you guys want it to turn at. So, but I do think that I do think that zero order, if zero order pitch works in a turret, you guys should really institute it for yaw. I think it would really work out good. So, anyways, thanks for listening, and have a good one. Thanks.